information out for those to return and re-enter into the Lahaina zone. And this is specific for residents and businesses impacted. And it's coming at a very critical time in all of our phases. We've come to this point. We want to meet the needs of the residents and the businesses by offering this information. So very grateful that Administrator Oliveira is here today and will be sharing, and of course you can see the map there. Behind me is the website that we developed called MauiRecovers.org that allows for updates and more information for residents and businesses who are seeking more details through the reentry process. So before I call up Darryl, he'll be saying his name and spelling it and his title for the benefit of your production teams, and then Administrator will have a statement to read, and then we'll take questions and answers from you through this process. So, Administrator.
Well, good afternoon. Before I start, I want to introduce myself. I'm Darryl Oliveira, Administrator for Maui Emergency Management. My name is spelled D-A-R-R-Y-L O-L-I-V-E-I-R-A. Again, first and foremost, I want to thank our media partners for being here and helping us get the information out to the community. The information that I'll be sharing today about our reentry plan is information the community has just been so anxiously awaiting. With that, I'd like to thank the community for their patience and understanding. As we can all imagine, there are so many pieces to this incident, so many activities taking place, a lot of work being done. All of it with moving Maui in a better path forward, or Lahaina community on a better path forward with recovery and healing. So again, I really want to appreciate or extend my appreciation to the community for being so patient and understanding, because I know this has been long awaited. I have a lot of information to share about our reentry plan. With that, I'm asking if we could stay focused on the reentry plan. I know that you have many questions for me as the administrator, but today's purpose and focus is really about the reentry plan, and if you don't mind, we'll stay focused on that. I just want to make sure that our community members can digest everything that we're about to share with them. It's something that they've been waiting for, it's very important to them, and I would just like to avoid and ask your help with avoiding any distractions and letting them comprehend what we're sharing. And if you don't mind, I have notes that I want to just stay on task, because again, I don't want to miss anything, so I may be periodically referring to my notes and talking points just to keep me on task. So with that being said, as Mahina had shared, there's a lot of information going out, and we're trying to make sure we take advantage of every platform and resource to keep the community well informed. So all of what I'm going to be sharing regarding our reentry plan will be made available on the MauiRecovers.org website, as well as we'll be circulating information in hard copy via our different partners and players. We will have them at the various assistance centers. We will try to work with the community hubs and points of distribution, as well as working with our partners like Red Cross and FEMA, who are coordinating the sheltering and the non-congregate shelter at the hotels, and obviously working with our hotel partners. Our goal is really to get this information out to the residents using every tool we can think of, so they understand the process and can take advantage of the opportunity that we really want to support them with coming in to revisit their properties, have some closure. That being said, we're also looking at having the information in as many of the area-specific multi-languages that are used. We know that English is not the only or primary language for many of the Lahaina residents, so we're working with our partners in translating the information to those other languages and making it available. So the purpose and goal of the reentry plan is to help our residents, our businesses, with getting back to their property temporarily to see and get some closure. For many of them, they have lost everything, including loved ones. We want to make this process as comfortable and as easy on them and keep them safe. For anyone that has had the opportunity to be out in the Lahaina area affected by the fire, it is just overwhelming to see the devastation. So part of our process is really supporting family members, residents, and people going out there as we escort them out there to make this easy on them and prepare them for what to experience. I'm very sensitive about that, having personally seen the devastation. I really want to make sure that people are prepared for that and we don't traumatize them anymore. Don't want to hurt anyone any more than they've already been hurt to date. Again, first and foremost, we want to make sure everybody's safe. So a lot of our entry procedures and process is going to be focused on safety. The other thing we want to do is to help property owners to have closure with regards to maybe insurance and other claims or other opportunities to have some financial assistance on their properties. So in addition to that closure piece with getting back to their homes or getting back to their properties and seeing and assessing what has happened, it's giving them the opportunity for those other pieces that provide closure and a way forward with insurance claims and other opportunities. As I keep mentioning, it's residents and property owners. We're aware that there may be properties, and likely to be a lot of properties, that are owned by one individual but had tenants or renters on it. And that could even be multiple tenants. As we know in Hawaii, we grew up with extended families in the household. It's not going to be uncommon to come across a household that has maybe multiple families living on the same property or facility or address. So we want to support those families coming in along with the property owner. Each may have different needs and different reasons for visiting the properties. But that's the target groups that we're going to limit the access to. What I'd like to do is show you a map. And part of this, it ties to what we've been working with the EPA on their phase 1, which we keep referring to, is the phase in which they are collecting and removing the household hazardous waste that can be identified on these properties. Again, the goal and intent is to get hazardous materials off the sites to support the re-entry by the residents and property owners. Even if they remove the hazardous waste, there's still a lot of hazards out there. If you can imagine, there's a lot of roof materials, steel, concrete, rubble, etc. So although they're removing those hazards, there's still many other things that could injure people accessing their property, which is why we really want to work together with the residents and property owners and do it in a way that we can escort them, support them, keep them safe, and make sure their experience is a safe one that provides them with what they need as far as closure. But as I mentioned, we created a map in partnership with our INT folks from CAL FIRE who are here. The map identifies different zones that we're calling that establish manageable areas that we can control and take people in a very systematic way. It's also being done in coordination where the EPA has completed their work. So again, when we look at this map, the EPA has been working, as I've communicated previously, from the north end and the south end, as well as from the east, and somewhat shrinking in to clear the properties involved in the fire. So it's taking time. As of 2 days ago, they had cleared just over 464 properties. I'm waiting for an update today how far further they have gone. So we're in close communication with the EPA on their progress with clearing properties. But it is not all in one area, it is in different sections of the overall fire area. So our intent is to, in advance, notify residents of when we're going to identify a particular zone for reentry, communicate that to, again, property owners, tenants, and occupants in advance, work with them on obtaining what we call as a pass. So it's going to be a small card that they can use when they come to the Lahaina Civic Center as the stopping point before making entry. We can meet with them, explain what we're going to be doing, and then escort them in. And again, we're not trying to make it so restrictive and uncomfortable. We're just trying to have a system that we can manage and ensure the right people are going in. Again, it's with the utmost respect for the residents and property owners who need to go in, need to have that moment of closure, need that time to grieve, and we really want to respect and support them with that. Okay, so we, as examples, this is just an example. If we were to identify zones 1A, 1B, and 1C as an initial starting point, and the numerical designation does not establish the sequence or the order by which we will go, the order will be basically subject to where has EPA cleared, what resources we have available to escort in, the number of properties we'll be working with, as well as our ability to make contact with the property owners or residents. When you see some of the larger zones, you can imagine or appreciate the number of contacts that need to be made. That can be challenging. When you think about it, we have over 7,000 survivors stretched over 40 hotels. So we're going to need to contact them, first identifying the property owner through our own county's real property tax records. We can identify and make contact with them. Many will be out of state or out of town. So it's giving them notice of the opportunity to come in and see their properties, assess their properties, and working with them. The others, like I mentioned, are those that were occupying the site or occupying the home or property. So the renters or the tenants. So we're going to have to reach out and contact every one of those in these zones that I gave you as a sample and explain to them the process, help them to get their pass, and then on the day that we allow entry, to work with them and support them as they get into the area. And I keep saying support them because I cannot stress enough of how some people may feel when they get in there and see the property. Again, I don't want to hurt anyone more, but if you've had a chance, you can only imagine how some people may react. It's so significant because as I walk through many of these subdivisions, there's really no reference or landmark where the property's boundaries are or lines are. I think some people will have a hard time even saying, this is my property. I can't recognize it anymore. So we want to really support them in this process. We also want to make sure they're safe. So part of that re-entry process is explaining to them the hazards that are out there, the hazards we've been communicating as far as the dust and the airborne particulate, and then providing them access to personal protective equipment, a removable disposable Tyvek coverall, booties, and a respirator or a N95 mask. And again, that's to help them be protected from some of the hazards that may be out there that could be kicked up with the dust and could pose a health risk. So we want to protect people going in. And all of us that will be escorting them will also be using the same personal protective equipment to protect ourselves. You can imagine the escorts going in repeatedly, they're repeatedly being exposed to that environment. So we want to take care of everyone with what's out there. So as I said, we'll make contact with the property owners and tenants of those zones in advance. We will then notify them in advance of when we will take them in or what days will be available. On the first 2 visits, we'll consider that an escorted visit because, again, we want them to be comfortable. We don't want them to be supported. If they want to bring in a faith-based person of their religious beliefs, we would support that. We're going to have healthcare providers on site. We will also have mental health professionals on site. Again, I just cannot stress the importance of supporting people going through this experience. From there, we will escort them in, we'll take them to their properties, and it's going to be a very, I want to say, sensitive. We stand back, we allow them to have their personal space and respect and allow them to, again, have that opportunity to do what they need to do to connect or reconnect with their property. In addition to the mental health professionals and the other service providers, we're working very closely with cultural practitioners and cultural observers and advisors. Using Kumu from Maui and using Kumu from the Lahaina community, part of this process is making sure we also respect the cultural aspect. They have been an integral part of the EPA clearance or hazardous waste removal process. They've been out there observing. They have shared with us that as they were doing the hazardous waste removal, they did come across potential cultural resources that we'd like to preserve. And if anybody who's grown up in Hawaii knows, it could be something like a rock wall that has significant cultural and historical relevance, as well as just some of the cultural, let's say, stones that may be on the properties. So again, we'd like to continue to include them in the process to help us preserve some irreplaceable resources out there. So again, we would be taking them out, having them observe their property. This would be done on a 8 to 4 schedule daily. This is going to be 7 days a week, but they will go in with us 2 days escorted. From there, the residents and property owners, those affiliated with a property, would be allowed to continue to come back in, to continue to visit their property. Some of them might be looking for closure with recovering personal effects, even right down to if they lost a loved one that is unaccounted for, maybe the collection of something that would give them closure as a memento of that person's passing. So again, we want to work really closely with the residents and the families out there. We are going to limit access only to the area residents and those affiliated with the property. Again, it's out of our ability to ensure the safety of everyone. We also want to respect that for some people, it's going to take multiple visits to get that closure. I would like to support them with that and not have them interfered with or in any way distracted by other activities. And that's why when we do this entry, it's going to be in areas for safety reasons away from where the EPA continues to work, as well as to allow the EPA continue to clear properties, but at the same time not create any distraction or disruption for those family members or property owners that are looking for that peace and solitude to give them their moment of getting closure. So again, we're trying our best to really respect the needs of the property owners and the residents. We will have also in place, as we support the entry, water, we will have washing stations, we will have portable restrooms, porta-johns available, shade. Anybody that's been out there knows it's hot. And I go back to stressing the safety aspect. I would highly discourage and advise that we adhere to those safety guidelines. We shouldn't be taking anyone in there who already has, let's say, existing health conditions, especially respiratory conditions. We don't want to expose them. So I would also discourage taking in our kupuna or elders, although I respect that for some of them, generationally, they've been on these properties and understand what they need to do. I'm just advising that really consider the health difficulties or the health problems that could be associated with taking people into an area that's got significant hazards and risks. The other group I'd be sensitive to is taking young children in. Again, there's just a lot of concerns for the health and safety, not just for an acute exposure or an acute problem or an injury because of debris. It's also the long-term health effects, which is why we want to try to minimize the amount of time people spend in there, but balance that with their need to get the closure they're looking for. As maybe just a closure to all of this, as you know, yesterday we supported the reopening of businesses in the Lahaina area. The intent there was to provide ease of access to essential goods and services for affected area residents. It was also done with the intent to provide employment or re-employment opportunities for residents affected by the fire who may have lost jobs. The third piece to that was also to try to help step in a direction of somewhat normalcy, very purposefully, because our wastewater system is very fragile at the moment. We don't want to create a sewage spill that could, again, result in another incident or difficulty for the community that could prolong access and recovery. So we're working with the businesses in that area. I'm trying to think, let's return to my notes if you don't mind. Again, I apologize. I didn't want to miss anything. I did speak to the hours of operation systematically identify the zones and work with those property owners and residents who will be given access, and we'll support them through that. We're looking at starting this or implementing our reentry program next week with the beginning of issuing the passes by next week, Friday. So before then, we will be working with our county resources and our partners on the public information going out. As I mentioned earlier, resources like the Maui Recovers website will have it there. We will also have hard copy products being circulated, and we'll do the best we can, and thanks to your help, getting the word out in the community about where we're headed next week. Our intent is by the following Monday, September 25th, is starting the reentry by zone. And again, there is no preference to where we start. There's no biases to that or preferential treatment. It's really with what can we manage with the resources we have, what can we do in coordination with EPA, and really just start the process of getting people back to their properties. That's pretty much an overview of our reentry plan. And I don't know, Mahina, if you want me to welcome questions.
Before we do that, I will ask our media partners to identify yourself, who you represent, ask your question. We'll do our best to give you that opportunity, and we ask for the same respect we offer to all of you as well. Since we only have Darryl here speaking, we're going to let him just come up, and we're repeating the questions for the sake of those who are watching and may not be hearing you on the other side of the cameras from all of our journalists here. I'll just stand to the side and call on you, and then we'll just let Darryl handle that. I think that'll be the easiest one. So we'll start first with Wendy. Jeremy, did I see your hand up? Followed by Jeremy and Cammy. Okay, Wendy, if you can just repeat the questions.
Sure.
Wendy Osher, Pacific Media Group in Maui now. My question is regarding the fragility of the system that you talked about with the wastewater and the electricity. Is all the infrastructure in the reopened businesses temporary, or is it something that will be worked on over time?
So the question is regarding the infrastructure in the areas that we opened or allowed reopening of businesses. Is the infrastructure temporary, and where are we at with maybe permanent solutions for infrastructure? So as I mentioned, in the business areas that we opened up, which is primarily in this area, yesterday, those businesses, we spent quality time with the operators to explain the wastewater system in some of those areas is not available, as well as potable water. So we asked the businesses to partner with us and have what we call a continuity of operations plan. They were asked to put in porta potties or porta johns for their customers and their employees, as well as to have hand washing stations. Just as we saw the Maui community coming together to support each other with this event, we see the business community doing the same, and I have to acknowledge and thank them for that. So we had two big, as an example, we had two very big businesses in the cannery complex, Long's and Safeway. Both of them brought in porta-johns, and when we met with them, we asked them, would you be supportive, along with the property manager there, with allowing the smaller businesses and even the public to use your porta-johns and your hand washing stations because of the limited access to those resources? And they wholeheartedly say, yes, we would welcome anyone using what resources they're putting in place. Again, just an example of this partnership and willingness to support one another through these difficult times. As far as the restoration of the infrastructure, that's going to be taking some time. I know that what's been communicated to the media is like the pump stations, but it's much more than the pump stations that may have been impacted. So the infrastructure with regards to water and wastewater is continually being assessed. The plans being developed as far as restoration and targeting. We'd love to turn it all back on, but we have to do it in a way that we avoid any potential catastrophic failure of the system and ensure the integrity is there before we create another incident. So measures are in place to support the businesses temporary infrastructure, with the goal of having permanent infrastructure in the future.
Jeremy, followed by Tammy. Sorry, and then Chelsea. Jeremy.
Hi.
Jeremy Lee, KITV4. Question, I was reviewing the week 2 press conference in which your predecessor, Herman Andaya, was up there, and he keeps referring to the Emergency Operations Center meeting at night. He keeps saying we met at night, and had we sounded the sirens that night. But this fire took place between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m. when it overtook Front Street. Can you explain to us if the Emergency Operations Center was meeting in the afternoon between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m.?
You know, I don't know the exact times at which the EOC was operated, and I apologize, Jeremy. I don't want to not answer your question, but as I opened, I was really hoping we could focus on the reentry, and I appreciate the question. And
I do think it's a reentry. There's so many people I speak to in West Maui. The number one thing they need for closure, they say to me, is to know what happened and to have their county officials tell them.
Sure. I know the EOC was open in the evening that night because it had opened because of the red flag warning. A weather event is what triggered the prompting of the EOC opening, as well as other EOCs being stood up across the state. As far as the sequence of events and who or what happened, I'm not prepared to answer the question. I'm not trying to avoid your question.
I'll ask a different question. Is there a protocol that you would follow, in other words, to make sure that the EOC convenes in a red flag warning or what have you, and the different departments such as police and fire are represented in person?
Right. So a lot of those conversations have been taking place not only here with Maui Emergency Management, but across the state. I think some tremendous opportunity to learn some very valuable lessons and look back. For us here at MEMA, since I've been on board, we have established what I feel is the protocols I'd like to follow and implement with the support of the mayor, as well as with HAIMA, our Hawaii Emergency Management at the state level. And that is, we will activate the EOC and stand up the EOC when a threat is identified and appropriately bring in the right agencies that would be in place to respond to the needs of the incident.
Would that include a utility company?
Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to give the others a chance. Tammy?
Hi, Kimmy Clark with the Pacific Media Group in Maui now. Two quick questions. One is, when people are allowed to go in, you talked about insurance. Will an insurance adjuster or somebody with their insurance company be allowed to go with them? And then the second question is, are you going to do any preparation for people who want to literally sift through things and look for grandma's ring or something like that? And, you know, and any kind of guidance that you can give to them?
Yes, thank you. Great question. So the question was, if a family or a property owner would like to bring their insurance adjuster in, and a follow-up to that was if they wanted to look for personal effects or mementos, are we going to provide them any kind of guidance or training? So to the first question, yes, we definitely want to support property owners bringing their insurance adjusters in. We would definitely want them to bring them in as and accompany their adjuster in. As I open with the passes that we're going to issue, it's for the residents and property owners to come in. We want to control that and again, respect the property owner's rights as well as respect the need for closure. So we would encourage property owners, accompany the insurance adjuster in, bring them with you. we will work with you on that. Even if it's after the first 2 days of escorted entry, we will continue to work with the property owners. And to your second questions about guidance, yes, as part of us meeting first before entering the zone, it's walking them through what we have recommended best practices. If you're going to look for something, as I mentioned, the dust may contain and is likely to contain toxins. We don't want people stirring it up, making it airborne, possibly exposing themselves to risk, but others in close proximity. So we'll be giving them guidance on how best to, as the EPA calls it, very gently moving through with a very gentle touch and removing what you need to remove to then look for those heirlooms or special things that you'd like to have. So we work with them on that.
And would you take into consideration winds, like so suggest, hey, it's super windy today, maybe try to do it another day, something like that?
Yes, so part of our contingency plans, and that would be explained to the residents as we talk about entry. Conditions could change, not only the wind, but let's say we have another event or an emergency occur. We have contingencies for the evacuation plan to get people out of the area, as well as if the winds do pick up and we see any potential threat, is rescheduling another day with them to get them back in. Because again, we really want people to have a safe entry in there and not have long-term health effects.
Thank you, Karen. We'll go to Chelsea, Christy, and then Shiva.
Hi,
Hi.
Chelsea Davis, reporter for Hawaii News Now. I think I heard you say that you're going to escort them the first 2 visits,
Mhm.
and then I think I also heard you say that it could take multiple visits. How long will they have, or how many times?
So right now, we're planning the first 2 visits to the properties for like the full day. We've consulted with other support agencies who have done this elsewhere across the country. They say they've spent, on average, less than half a day with a resident trying to identify their property, trying to get closure. But we know that here in Hawaii, we're very connected to our home, very connected. So I don't want to limit the time that people have, as well as respect that on your first visit, it may be hard to stay, but then as you maybe develop and prepare better, some better understanding, you can come back again and spend longer time, as well as bring other family members that you may have that you couldn't bring in. I'm also sensitive to that many of the residents may be working. So to work within our schedule, even though it's 7 days a week at 8 to 4, it still may present with some access challenges for residents. So really, we want to work together with the property owners and residents and ensure that before any work starts with the Corps of Engineers, they've had an opportunity to get back to their property.
So just to clarify, once they're allowed entry, it's not like it will only last a week and then they'll be denied. Once they're allowed, they will be allowed until further notice?
Correct. Like I said, the 2 initial escorted visits is really to help them, maybe guide them through it, help them, support them through this. When it appears that they're comfortable and they want to come back for more visits, I think they will develop that comfort level, not needing our assistance, but we'll still be there in the area observing, because if we see something happen that it could be a safety concern, we'd like to intervene before someone gets hurt.
Thank you, Chelsea. We'll go to Christian and Shivo and ask that you repeat the question.
Yes, sorry.
And that was one of my things, was after the 2 visits, they can go back on their own, right?
Yes.
And then just a quick clarification, you will be providing PPE, and then, will this be done appointment only, or will it be like, okay, this zone you're going, everybody who's in this zone, let's go in, or is it appointment only, or how is that gonna work?
So the question is, if we'll be providing PPE, yes. Is it by appointment only? What we're doing is for the first 2 visits is do it by zone. So that's where we're going to have resources for. If you look at one of the first zones that might have, I'm just going to pick a number, again, maybe 10 properties. We're planning on having the resources to accompany 10 potential groups of people going in, residents or property owners. The bigger the zones, bigger the need, will have more resources.
And then just another one, who are the escorts? I mean, who are we looking at to be the actual escorts?
So-
What staffing is that coming from?
Sure. So we have VOAD, who's providing the experience that what they do in other areas through VOAD. They have partner nonprofits or organizations that help with, let's say, the question that was asked, with sifting and looking for personal effects. We also will have a mental health professional. One of the partners with health services is Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, which is providing nurses and medically trained personnel to be available. We also will have members of our staff and also Department of Public Works, as well as Maui PD and some of the other county agencies.
And then there's one other, sorry, I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify. Do you know how many total properties we're talking about, business total and residential, has that been determined?
And I'm sorry, I don't have that number, but I know just based on the reports we're getting from the total property damaged or destroyed, we're in over 2,000.
Total.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And before we get to Chivo, clarify what VOAD is.
So it's volunteer organizations assisting in disaster. We have a state VOAD lead that's based out of HIEMA, or a state emergency management office. But these are organizations, nonprofits, that come together in support of a disaster and represent many different smaller organizations, but they bring different capability. A good example is Team Rubicon, which many of you may have heard of. It is former military personnel who travel the world responding to post-disaster events and provide anything from chainsaw operations to remove trees, assisting with debris and other things. So we have a nice team. When we spoke yesterday as part of our daily briefing and preparedness for this, between the different resources, we have over 65 volunteer members available to support as we go in. And that doesn't even include the cultural support. It doesn't include the faith-based support. So we have many more resources that would be integrated into the entry and support the families.
And I'm sorry, one
Yeah.
last question. When was the when will people be able to start applying, and what's that process? And where?
Thank you. And again, what is the past process and when can they start? And I apologize, I didn't cover that in the presentation, but we're looking at implementing the application process for the passes starting next week, Friday. That'll give us the entire week to continue to work with our partners on identifying those property owners and those residents in the zones that we identify. We will communicate that in advance of Friday, well in advance of Friday, and also be, again, communicating which zones we're working with so people can identify. Part of it is we don't want to refer just to the zone. I mean, if I was a layperson looking at a map, I might not be able to identify if that's the zone I'm in. So we want to provide addresses as well, not names of parties, but provide the addresses so people can say, yeah, that's the block I live in, that's the block where my home is at, and really work to ensure we contact those people that want to and need to get in. So
Question from
Fridays for the
Chivo and
passes.
then Wendy.
Chivo with Akaku, Maui Community Media. First of all, I wanted to thank you for all of the effort that you're putting into doing this the right way. And I think that that's very important to recognize. What would an average team look like after the first few days? Is that a matter of who these people would like to accompany them, and will the same group try to stay with that person throughout all of their visits?
Sure. So the question is, after the first visits, what will the team complement look like that will be supporting those that want to enter and get back? We will do our best to support them with whatever resources they need. We know that some people may have mobility issues. Again, as someone who may have some impairments or other things, so we want to support them if they want access. We want to support those that still may feel uncomfortable or a challenge, but still need to get there for their purposes. So as far as the mental health, the faith base, we'll continue to work with them, as well as continue to work with others as we expand the area to get people in. And that's where it's so important, I think, when we do this first 2 zones or 3 zones, starting on the 25th, it will give us a sense of what are going to be the resource demands as we look forward. A lot of it is unknown. How are people going to feel? How are they going to react? Are they going to have any other additional needs? The other thing is, like we mentioned, giving them the PPE. I'm really going to have to caution the residents and property. It's hot. We need to protect them. They may want to stay longer, but you're going to need at some point to hydrate and get out of that for your own health and safety. So it's just helping people to understand we want to respect and support them, but here are the risks and how do we help you lessen or mitigate the risks for you.
And one just follow up on that, if I may. And that is, considering how potentially dangerous the ash is and some of the stuff that they will be walking through, if someone wanted to gather some ashes or a little memento, would they be asked to wait on that until it's cleared or a future date? Or how will that work?
Again, in talking to those who have done this elsewhere, as well as in discussion with Department of Health, who's like our lead with the health risks, we feel there's a way to support them with collecting cash or mementos in a way that doesn't create further health or additional health risks, minimizing the dust that becomes airborne. So something as simple as, rather than trying to pick it up in your hand, it might be using a spade or something else, and then putting it in a sealed container before walking and moving around, and keeping things as controlled as we can, but doing it as respectfully and supportive as we can.
Thank you.
Sure.
Wendy, and then Paul, and then Caitlin.
Just really quick, can you go over the process for people who are renting properties and also for those multi-level structures where access might be a little bit compromised or a safety issue?
So good questions. One is, how are we going to address or support those who are in rental properties, as well as when we get into the multifamily, multi-level structures? So first, to the rent, we're going to treat, again, the renters the same as the property owner, because again, they had a connection, that was their home, they were the occupant at the time of the fire, just as the property owner who owns the property has an interest there. So there'll be no discrimination between a renter versus a property owner. We want to afford them the same opportunities to have closure. As far as the multi-level, multi-story structures, part of the process, and again, I apologize I didn't get into that much detail in the plan, but alongside the EPA doing their hazardous household waste control or removal, we also have structural engineers or experts going through and identifying those structures that might be structurally compromised. So in some cases, the structure may be deemed unsafe to make entry. We'll work with, again, those families or people who are affected by that. We will try to get them what they need for closure, but in some cases, it may not be possible to have safe entry into a structure if it's determined to be structurally unsafe.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Oliveira. It's Paul Akert here with Maui Alert. Two-part question. First of all, in relation to Chilo's question about the environmental issues, are you actively monitoring air quality, taking samples, in part for the people there, but also the people nearby? And then secondly, how are we proving for people that may have lost everything that they actually belong there?
Sure. So the questions were, are we doing air monitoring or air quality monitoring for safety purposes in the area? And the follow-up questions, sorry, if you could repeat it again.
How we verify the people that are applying, if they lost all their documents,
Right.
can prove that.
Thank you. How do we assure that we're giving passes to those that have any kind of affiliation with a property, a renter or a property owner? So in the air monitoring, working very closely with Department of Health and EPA. EPA is currently, when they're doing their work in the field, they are monitoring conditions for their workers with worker safety. So they're giving us some information as to the air quality there, and we're not seeing anything of concern. And obviously, they would be pulling out if there was an issue of concern with health and safety. The Department of Health is using some of the EPA data, as well as is looking at increasing their capability to monitor. As part of our responsibilities with the Maui Emergency Management and the response to this incident, we have pushed up a request for assistance for additional air quality monitors. If you were to go on both the EPA's AirNow website and you can put in Fire AirNow, it'll give you access to the monitors that are in the field as we speak. Some are actually owned by residents because they're in residential properties. If you open up that website, you can click on that particular monitor and it'll tell you historically what has been the air quality as well as what's current and real time. Well, we are looking at building additional capability and capacity with Department of Health, not only for the area affected, but those areas around it and downwind. And as you know, a wind change affects different communities. Right now, the Department of Health does have 2 monitoring stations, one in Wailuku and another one in Kihei. But again, we're looking at building much more capability and capacity. I'm very, maybe not sensitive, but very familiar with that process coming from the Big Island. When we have a volcanic event, we are doing air quality monitoring, so very familiar with how Department of Health does that. So able to take some of those lessons learned and apply it here with a fire event. And then with the identifying resident and property owner, part of it is they will be requested to bring in the proper credentialing, as well as I mentioned, a property owner can be verified against the real property data. And then for those that were renting, as part of them being taken in and registered with Red Cross and FEMA, they were at that point also required to show some proof of connection to the address, whether it be a utility bill or something else. But we will work with the residents. We understand many of them lost everything, including identification and some of those documents. Well, we will work with them, we'll work with the property owners, and our goal is to really ensure that those that have affiliation to the property have an opportunity to get in there.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of Paul's question, it's Chrissy from KH1 too. But as far as enforcement, you know, just making sure unwanted individuals are not trying to make their way into these zones and just, you know, keeping this program for those who it was intended for.
Right, I really appreciate the question. How will we consider enforcement actions to protect the access rights and needs of those affected by the fire? That's where I'm really looking to all of you to help us get the word out. It really comes down to cooperation and support from fellow citizens. You know, I have a hard time trying to understand why would somebody want to go in there if they have no affiliation to the property. And we should all try to respect and appreciate what people have gone through. Allow them that opportunity to grieve, allow them that opportunity to heal, and also allow them the opportunity to go back and possibly bring closure. The other thing is the safety aspect. It is not a safe environment to be in out there. So we need to ensure that people understand that it's not that, I guess, we want to infringe on anyone's rights. We're trying to protect our community, every single person, especially those that are in there, one, trying to work, two, trying to access their property, trying to get closure. And there's much more work to be done. As we keep bringing up, the Corps of Engineers at some point will begin the debris removal, which is necessary. But we have made a commitment not before we allow the residents and property owners in there to get their closure.
I think you mentioned that sometime in the next week or so, you'll let people know what zones you're going to start first.
Correct.
How is that process going to work, and will there be some kind of outlay of zones, you know, so people can know maybe 2 or 3 weeks, or, oh my, man, I'm not going to get into my property maybe for a couple months?
Right. So the question was, as we identify the zones and communicate forward to the public, what is that process with communication and coordination? So by this afternoon, our teams, they're actually out in the field right now. We have our reentry team actually doing a mock or test walkthrough of a scenario-based event as if we're walking and escorting people in. This is giving us some ground truth as to what it's going to take, what's going to be the experience, the coordination, the logistics, et cetera. But I'm confident by this afternoon we will already identify the first zones that we're going to allow access. We will revisit that with obviously the executive team in the county and make sure that we're all comfortable with moving forward, that we have the resources to support the citizens going back in, the residents and property owners. And we'll probably be able to announce that by as early as Monday. And again, part of that is giving us the time to validate we have the resources. The last thing I want to do is announce we're going to take people in to only cancel it because we find out we don't have adequate resources to support that. So again, we will do our best to, once we identify zones in advance, communicate it early, and then work with the property owners. And as I mentioned, we still have to identify who those people are, and that's going to take a little bit of time.
Before I go to Hawaii News Now, there's a question that came in. Will residents be able to take photos while they're there in our process?
Again, that's going to be part of their closure. We would support that with taking photographs of your property. Again, I'm going to ask property owners and those taking photos, please be mindful that posting things on different sites can be very traumatic for others. So I think if while we're escorting property owners out there, we'll have those sensitive conversations that, again, you know, people will react, people will hurt differently, and we just need to be mindful of what we do.
I just want to understand, make sure I understand the timeline. So hopefully identifying the first zones by this afternoon, and then announcing it on Monday, and then issuing the passes next week, Friday, for hopefully re-entry the following Monday.
Correct.
But people will be, the process of getting a pass is only on Friday, or that's going to be happening?
No,
in the week?
once we open up the site, sorry, I'll repeat the question.
Yeah.
So the question was a timelines or chronology. So yes, we should be able to confirm the first entry sites or zones by this afternoon, announce it by Monday and share that with the public, and then have the process for them to acquire the passes starting on Friday. Once we open the access to acquiring passes, that will be also a 7-day-a-week. Again, I appreciate that many residents are working. If we only did it Monday through Friday, some are going to miss an opportunity. So we really want to do this with, doing this is not for us, this is for the people. So we want to do it right. Excuse me.
So I just, again, so there's no, from the Monday to the Friday, there's nothing other than gathering your documents, you don't start applying or anything, that's all happening Friday.
Right, because as I mentioned, we'll have to identify who
Yeah.
those people are. If I just put out a map, I'm sure people will, I don't know if that's my zone, I don't know if that's my address. It's going to be very difficult for me to say that's me. So when we make contact with the individuals, that's what, up to Friday, sorry.
To contact you on Friday.
Yep.
I got it right here. Yeah, sorry.
And to clarify, the Friday we're talking about is not tomorrow Friday.
Okay.
And you're gonna contact them, they're not gonna contact you.
It might be both. Once we identify the zones, some people may already identify with that and say that's my parcel, my property. But we definitely want to try to reach out and make contact. We know a couple of things. Not everybody has access to social media. Not everybody has access to internet. So we have to use every platform and tool we can to reach out. The last thing I want to have is somebody miss an opportunity because we didn't try to do our job to reach out to them.
We've been at it for about 45 minutes with Administrator Oliveira, so I appreciate the time. The map will stay here for you. And again, we want to emphasize information remains at mauirecovers.org. We'll continue to provide updates, and I'm very grateful for our community's patience as we make our way to the most important phase, which is happening soon around the corner. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that was a lot of information. That was MEMA Interim Administrator, that was Darryl Oliveira, providing an overview of the county's re-entry plan, which has been long awaited. Oliveira saying that his team is looking to roll this plan out by next week, and that includes the re-entry passes and the application process. He says he expects to start that by next Friday, that's the 22nd. And then by Monday, the 25th, they hope to start accessing the areas by zone. Now, he did emphasize that first and foremost, safety is paramount, and the county will focus on helping target groups who lived in the accessible areas. Right now, you're taking a look at the map of the accessible areas. Everything shaded in green, that's open right now. Everything shaded in the red, that's still closed off. Now, MEMA will help with insurance efforts and getting financial assistance. Oliveira did say at one point that more than 400 properties have been cleared by the EPA. However, he didn't go any further into specifics, so it's still unclear if that number includes properties in Kula. He did, though, stress that there is a safe reentry strategy, which includes an escorted visit. I believe that's 2 escorted visits, which is meant to provide whatever kind of support that survivors need when they get back into their properties. And this is to not cause any additional trauma. He says that there's a lot of work that's been done and a lot of sensitivity was put into this plan. And looking ahead, they're using all types of platforms to inform the public. And that includes the Maui Recovers website and then the various hubs and resource centers to get more information out. And information is being translated into multiple languages. But again, re-entry is to get the residents and the property owners back onto their properties for closure. And again, Oliveira trying to be mindful to the many needs of so many people, because once those survivors get back onto their property, they likely will not recognize it. And once again, Oliveira looking at next week to put this plan in place, re-entry passes and the application process to start Friday the 22nd, then by Monday the 25th, they will begin accessing areas by zone. And we're going to have a full wrap of this information coming up on KITV4 Island News at 4. So we do want to thank you for tuning in to KITV4 Island News for this breaking news update. Right now, we want to return you to regular programming.